Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the webinar of the resource series, which is called the Resource Calling Series, and it specifically will be on the buyer's guide to on-site renewable electricity and storage across Europe. And for this webinar, we will have the pleasure to listen to three great speakers. The first one will be Harald Overholm, the CEO of Allied Energy. Also, we'll have the pleasure to listen to Karol Gopczynski, Head of Climate and Energy at Inga Group, and Jiri Moons, Sustainable Development Leader for Decathlon. Very good. So please allow me to pass my slide. Let me see. Let me check. Okay, perfect. So first, I would like to introduce you to the typical corporate sourcing journey of the different options available. So one of the options that we for corporates to explore actually contracted green tariffs and also maybe purchase renewable energy certificates, so guarantees of origins. And there are companies that they prefer more ambitious strategies, meaning forward purchase agreements and also maximizing on-site generation in their facilities. So as you can see here in the graph at the right, we can see the trajectory of the capacities for PPAs and also for commercial and industrial installations on site in Europe. So these are annual installations. And as you can see, for PPAs in Europe that started around 2016, and now in 2020, we already see capacity deployments of about 4 gigawatts. And for the on-site generation, for the next slide, please. For on-site generation, we can see that actually for 2020, we can see the capacity that has been doubled of about 8 gigawatts. And in total, the cumulative capacity was about 60 gigawatts. And we are seeing forecasts for 2030 of about 380 gigawatts of renewable capacity for on-site only. So this slide shows the highest visibility of the renewable commitments possible for different strategies. And as you can see, the one at the top is specifically on maximizing on-site generation of renewables on their facilities and how that can be done. So actually, we can think about different methods, different approaches that can be, for instance, self-owned on-site and also through leasing models, on-site PPAs, or even nearby the facilities leveraging private wires PPAs. In the next slides, the speakers will present these models more in depth, their own specific examples. And as we can see in the next slide, we have produced a report, a resource report, specifically on site renewable generation. And the speakers of today have contributed to this report. And now I'll present you the added value from on-site renewable generation. And that, for instance, can be to optimize the use space of your own facilities, meaning the carports and also the rooftops of the warehouses, for example. Another added value can be a better use of the grid, that lowering the grid losses and also to reduce the need for grid expansion. So by reducing the need to deploy more transmission and distribution lines, actually, ultimately, the cost for consumers, that would be also reduced. So that's another advantage. The third one is actually to hedge against the financial risks. That means reducing a consumer's electricity bills by decreasing the exposure to fossil fuel price volatility. Then also mobilize investments in renewable electricity sector, meaning that actually the corporates, they would be financing, deploying new renewable energy capacities, and that would be contributing actively to the energy transition by deploying more renewable energy plants. And the fourth one Also very important is that actually these companies, they can show leadership in contributing towards clean and sustainable societies by installing these renewable energy plants on their facilities or around them. Very good. So after this introduction, we will listen to Karol Gopczynski, head of the Inca Group. Oh, okay. Before that, I would like to introduce you to the contents of the report of resource that we have developed, and these include, for example, sorry, first slide. Perfect. This report reveals the potential of on-site renewable electricity generation in Europe for the different member states. And also we can see, perfect, we identify the challenges and the barriers faced by the industrial and commercial energy consumers. It showcases measures to unlock the added value and potential of on-site renewable generation and storage, like the common on-site business models for the industrial and commercial facilities, including, for instance, installing, as mentioned, solar PV plants on the rooftops or the carports or nearby the facilities via direct wire. And the last bit, it provides a European regulatory framework that is fit for the future for the commercial and industrial actors. Now, yes, I'll leave you with Karol Gopczynski, head of the Climate and Energy Group at Inca Group. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mers, for the introduction and showing the interesting content. Inca Group is one of the companies working under IKEA brand, representing 90% of the sales and bringing IKEA on to people on 32 markets. And if I can ask for the next slide. Renewable energy is a very important part of the IKEA climate positive commitment, and it will play a significant role when it comes to reducing the footprint across the value chain. And on the next slides, so we know that climate change is impacting many people's lives, and it will impact even more people's lives into the future if we don't start to act now. And as a big global brand, IKEA has responsibility to act and take more climate action, as well as opportunity to be even more relevant for the customers who want to live within the limits of the planet. On the next slide. And IKEA vision is to create better everyday life for the many people, and we know that the climate change is the biggest threat when it comes to impacting the people everyday lives across the world. Next one, please. And we know that our customers and coworkers are already asking us to act even more and be much more bold when it comes to actions and collaborate with others to create net zero economy. Next one. That's why IKEA has a commitment to become climate positive by 2030. And to become climate positive by 2030, on the next slide, we can see the total IKEA value chain where we are considering emissions from the supply chain, meeting the customers, and product use at home. And energy is used within the different parts of the supply chain when it comes to material processing, production, transportation, using energy use within the stores and distribution centers, energy use for the customer travel and deliveries, as well as energy used in people's homes to power LED lighting provided by IKEA. And to become climate positive, on the next slide, we can see the model when we said if we don't take any actions and continue business as usual, the emissions will keep increasing. And to be able to reduce more greenhouse gas emissions than IKEA value chain emits, we first of all need to focus on drastic reduction of emissions. Second area, it's about carbon removal within the company value chain. And the third area, it's about going beyond and enabling reduction of the footprint within the society. And here, one of the examples is offering home solar to our customers across the markets where we operate. Yeah, and on the next slide, and we can see that there are three main areas to drastically reduce emissions, and one of them is connected to energy, 100% renewable energy use in efficient way. And when we go further, you can see that Inca Group consists of three parts: IKEA Retail, Inca Centers, and Inca Investments. And today we have 388 stores in 32 markets and 40 meeting places, which are located usually next to the IKEA stores, plus Inca Investments. And on the next slide, you can see the total footprint of Inca Group, considering all the products which are being offered to our customers, plus our operations. Yeah, next one. Inca Investments invested in renewable energy to be able to generate more renewable energy that we consume by 2020. And can you click please? 4 times. We already invested 2.5 billion euro in off-site and on-site renewable energy generation to be able to generate more renewable energy that we consume. And we own 547 wind turbines across many markets in the European Union and Canada and the US. And currently we are focusing on China and Russia, where we don't own the big off-site investments to be able to consume renewable electricity. We own 2 solar farms and we have 935,000 solar modules covering the IKEA buildings and some of the parking lots. Yeah. On the next one. So when it comes to our emissions connected to energy use in operations, we said by 2030 we need to reduce emissions by 80%. And to do it, we need to focus on the renewable electricity consumption. And on the next slide, you can see that our commitment is to secure 100% renewable electricity consumption by 2025. Today we are consuming already renewable electricity in majority of the markets. And the big focus now is mainly Russia and China, and then Australia, India, and Japan. But these 2 markets, Russia and China, are where we have the largest consumption among these markets, and that's where our focus is today. Next one. And it's not only about electricity, it's about heating and cooling, and that's why we are working towards securing 100% renewable heating and cooling in all the buildings, and mainly electrifying and using heat pumps, ground source heat pumps, and air source heat pumps. And the third element, it's about energy efficiency. And this is what we can see on the next slide. We are focusing on improving energy efficiency across operations because, of course, the cleanest and cheapest energies we never use. And that's why we support the EU new Fit for 55% package, where existing climate and energy regulations are being reviewed to increase the ambition when it comes to renewable energy and energy efficiency in the buildings to be in line with the 2030 target. And when we go to the next one, when it comes to renewable electricity consumption, we have 3 primary ways. First choice is to secure on-site generation of renewable electricity, then investing off-site and generating off-site renewable electricity and connect to our consumption. And the third one is the purchase of renewable electricity attributes from other generators of renewable electricity on the market. And these are the 3 primary ways. When it comes to minimum and leadership criteria, we are looking as well into the 24/7 renewable electricity consumption when we just finalizing the pilot in Europe to combine our consumption in some of the stores with wind farms in Finland. And can we go to the next slide? Yeah, thank you. Do you hear me? Just want to check because I see I have some connection issues. Yeah. So today I would like to present you two examples. One is from the IKEA US, and when we go to the next slide, you can see exactly how it works. Within the store, we have the PV panels on the roofs and carports, and we are able to generate more renewable electricity that is being consumed on site. And in the real time, whenever we are not able to consume the generated renewable electricity, it's sold to the grid. And the second example, which I would like to present, is from IKEA Australia. And you can see on the next slide, it's located in Adelaide, where we are not only generating solar panels on the rooftop and carport, but as well combining the generation with battery storage and digital solution. And here, through combining these three elements, we are able to be much more flexible when it comes to providing electricity to the grid and consume it first. But then when it comes to excess electricity, we can either store it in the batteries or you can inject it into the grid. And this is thanks to the battery storage and the digital solution. So whenever there is a peak when it comes to consumption of electricity in the grid, then we can provide additional electricity, and during off-peak hours, we can load the batteries. And this project is a great example of collaboration between the grid owner and the multiple solutions providers when we collaborate to create this holistic concept, which is helping not only us to reach the targets, but as well to enable the grid to be more resilient. And I would like to close with the last slide, and looking forward to the discussion later on, and hand over to Yuri from Decathlon.
Thank you, Carol, for the insights of Inca Group. I'm Yuri from Decathlon, and I want to present you a little bit the strategy from the next slide of Decathlon. The reason that we exist today is to be useful to the people and to their planet. That's our main ambition within Decathlon as a sporting brand. To present myself, I'm the Sustainable Development Leader for Belgium, where I'm leading the topic to become neutral in 2050 for Decathlon, but also my main responsibility is to get the renewable energy target for 2026 done by the countries, because within Decathlon we are working on a decentralized strategy, because we want to source the renewable energy as local as possible and want to give autonomy to every country to decide and to work on their proper strategy within the country potential. And for us, we like Inca Group do, are working on three main ways. Is the on-site solar by sending to the grid or auto consumption is our main priority. And we can add it to that the power purchase agreement for offsite and everything what is green electricity supply or unbundled guarantees of origin, or also something that can be done by the countries within their strategy to become 100% renewable. The main difficulties, barriers that we face today is that Decathlon is representing 60 markets with 1,700 stores and warehouses, and 60% of them are in rental. So we need to face with landlords that have the electricity contract. In the 40% of property sites, we can easily go for our own strategy and work for the on-site solar or on-site wind options where we can. But the main way that we want to do is to maximize the roof and the parking space that we have within property sites and within rental sites. So we want to implement the landlords within our strategy. The majority of our installations are third-party investments, so rather different than Inca Group is investing themselves. We are doing it by on-site PPA models or leasing models, depending on what we can do locally, what the country barriers are, and where we can face a third-party investment. We want to try to do this. And a main way to achieve our target is to involve landlords in the beginning of the process, and before we go to rent a certain area, we want to open the discussion about renewable energy. We want to open up the on-site potential and discuss with them if there is any option, and if they are not interested, that we as Decathlon can become the owner of the roof, so that we, or the parking lot, where we can at that moment do an on-site investment for solar panels. And I want to have two sites that we have realized, where we had a small store of 2,000 square meter on a retail site of 6 stores, where we convinced the landlord to work together with a third-party investment, where the landlord gets a roof rent for his roof, and we can have a competitive energy price within a PPA model, where we can have at that moment on-site solar. So that's a good thing. And the second point that was interesting by the landlord is that he challenged us and the third party to have also battery storage, and to maximize really the space of the roof that there was, the potential, maximize the potential to have a battery for the common areas and the alimentation of the common areas, where he wants to go off grid with this installation. And that's something and a good example where we see that landlords sometimes are even more advanced than we are, and are really thinking together with us to achieve our renewable energy target, and they want to go further than we go. So that's already a good sign. For us, it's still difficult within a lot of countries to get that landlords convinced that there is also a business case within them and for them. But this shows us that there is still potential, and that we are on the good way to achieve it. And second, something that we did was an interaction with local customers, where we had a carport system already, a store where we had solar panels on the roof, and there was still potential for the carport on the parking lot. And we looked into the citizens that are lived around, if they were interested at that moment within energy or renewable energy coming from solar panels. And we co-invested, the citizens co-invested within the installation. We gave away our parking lot, and we became, within the energy community, one of the we take 10% out of the consumption there, and all the rest is coming for the energy community. So there are a lot of people that are benefiting from these installations that are living nearby. And it's also done by a solar as a service model, where we implemented a supplier that was interesting to develop this case, that wanted to work also with local customers and with the Decathlon customers. So for us, there was a win. We have more maximized our parking lot by the solar panels. So for us, there is an interest. We can have a slightly consumption out of it, and also we can have together with the local customer, have a local need, and connect the suppliers and the customers together to decentralize a little bit the energy, and work and see if there is potential to work on a smaller scale for renewable energy, and optimizing for us also all the land that we have. And that's something that we are looking now to deploy in several countries, if there is any potential to do it, and if it's a benefit for us and for our customers, so that we can a little bit go beyond the implementation of our proper on-site solar systems. So that's basically it for Decathlon, and I want to hand over to Harold.
Thank you so much, Jory, for that account, and thanks also to Carol, of course, and IKEA for talking about that. I'm going to build on actually what Jory has been talking about with the solar as a service model. I represent a light energy. Let me get my slides in order here. See if I can get the first one. There you go. And a light is we're the supplier. So in this webinar, we represent the supply side. We do commercial and industrial rooftops across Europe, and we do it as power purchase agreements or solar as a service. And this is really the core of who we are. We set up the company 8 years ago. I'm the CEO and founder, and we had a simple vision 8 years ago of leading the market in Europe for subsidy-free solar. And you know, there's only one way that solar can be subsidy-free. It's when someone else than the government pays for it. So that's what a PPA is about. It's about helping power users to pay for solar in order to build more solar. And we were really inspired by the US market, where this had happened at a large scale, and it's still happening in the US at an even larger scale. So yeah, and we became kind of pioneers in this. We did the first, I mean, I think we did among the first rooftop PPAs ever in Europe in 2015, and we did them in Sweden, which is a very dark country. So you can imagine that it was a little bit of a challenge, but those were pilots, and the market has scaled very rapidly since. So at the time, we were doing things like 50 kilowatts. Now we're doing maybe 1.5 megawatt rooftops. We're also done the largest solar park in Sweden 2 times actually, and both like as PPA power purchase agreements with large corporates. And a good example of this was that we just released a project yesterday with Kingspan. If you haven't heard of Kingspan, it's one of the largest construction materials companies in the world. It's an early RE100 member, a net zero company, already reached net zero energy actually, highly sustainable. So they are opening a new factory in Sweden, and so we're building 1.3 megawatts of solar on that rooftop. We're selling the power back to Kingspan, so the fact that Kingspan will be paying for the power over the long term helps us to build the project. And of course, Kingspan will save money on the power, and they will keep achieving their SDG and net zero goals. So that's how most power purchase agreements look like. What more to say about us? Well, I mean, the one thing I'm going to add is that we are, of course, in the middle of a market that's just to go back all the way to the beginning to what Mercy said when she showed you the numbers about what's happening with commercial and industrial solar in Europe. It's a very, very rapidly expanding market. So I told you we did the first PPAs on rooftops in 2015. And these days we have a pipeline ourselves of about 1.5 gigawatts of rooftop PPAs. So the shift of interest in this from corporate customers has been astonishing over the last 5 years. And it's the mix, as always, of sustainability goals, Agenda 2030 being much more sharp, and interest in saving money on power, basically. Good, I'm gonna move on to my next slide and just guide you through what I feel is the most important topic here, which is, so in the end, what is actually holding this market back? I think we all agree that solar is important. We all know the potential for rooftop solar in Europe. It's vast, it's enormous. I mean, we could power so much of our needs by just simply using rooftops and on-site installations in the future. And of course, as Mercy showed you, this market is growing fast, but I think anyone who's been in it for a while would also agree that, you know, let's look at why it's not growing faster, because there's so much left to be done. Being a supplier here, I spend my days talking to commercial and industrial customers who are thinking about rooftops. So we talk to hundreds of large power users every year about on-site installations. maybe even thousands these days actually. And so what I'm going to tell you on this slide is just what we pick up along the lines of what those people are telling us. And it doesn't really matter if they end up becoming our customers or not, or if they pick a PPA business model or not. This is kind of what we hear from everyone who is out in the market thinking about this. So the first big headline here is that the general sense of hassle with on-site. If you were to ask anyone, I think 99% of those who've been looking at doing some kind of on-site rooftop solar installation, what held them back? What was difficult? They would just say, you look, there was just so much hassle going on. And I think that hassle is, first of all, it's just all the decisions you have to make in every dimension, from technical to environmental to financial, etc. It's all the stakeholders that you'll end up interacting with. When you do on-site, there might be a local site manager, there might be a real estate owner or lease company. You might have all kinds of consultants. You have headquarters perhaps with their own requirements. It's just a quagmire of stakeholders. And then add to that the fact that today, when people consider on-site solar, they usually start thinking, well, hey, this is a really fast-moving area. Actually, it's not just about solar; it's about the whole energy solution, and that's just what Carol was telling you about with the IKEA installations. And people go, wait, is that something we have to have a comprehensive plan for? Do we have to understand battery storage and digital optimization and EV charging and solar at the same time? Can we do it one by one? Well, how are we going to figure that out? And the second headline here that just comes with the hassle, and this is something that's really changed in the market over the last 5 years, is that I think the hassle is just getting more difficult because of the fact that rooftop solar is becoming more important. And what I mean by that is that 5 years ago, a lot of companies would come to us and talk about rooftop solar, being interested in maybe a pilot installation, maybe something that was a little bit visible but small, maybe frankly just for the image picture to put on the annual report with the headquarters with the small solar panels, and that's fine. We don't judge, but what we can tell today is that there's a different ballgame. So people have realized, and this is something that the US market realized a long time ago, that it's not about the solar panels, it's about the solar power. So you do something because you want a lot of solar power, and you want it over a long time, and you want it to be very, very predictable. And that suddenly means that there's even more sharpness to the analysis you have to make. And in case you doubt me in terms of what hassle actually means when you start looking at on-site rooftop, I just tried to make this very schematic overview on the right-hand side here. And I'm just going to say, for us, so we're a professional owner of solar assets. So when we do a power purchase agreement, we sell power to the client, but we have the technical know-how. We build the asset, we manage the asset, we have the financing to own it. So whatever goes on with this installation, it's end up being our headache. And when we look at solar assets, these are all the topics that we look at. So it's not just about picking the panels; it's about a whole lot of other things. That's what I mean by hassle. Now, having said all those things, not having raised perhaps the enthusiasm here for on-site solar, what is my recommendation? Well, my simple recommendation is, stop it. Like, don't think about this. Don't think about the hassle. I'm going to move to the next slide to explain what I mean, because this is the one reason why the idea of solar as a service was created. Solar power purchase agreements, it doesn't matter if it's PPA or not, just any way of turning solar into a service was created in 2005 in the US by a guy called Jigar Shah and a company called SunEdison. And Jigar, who's someone who's been a role model for us setting up this company, Jigar had one single goal and purpose with doing that. It was to remove the hassle from the market, make it super, super easy and fast for corporate customers to get solar. So we can learn a bit from the US market in terms of what this has meant, because I think this is not the European market is growing fast, and we're all exploring what this means and what subsidy-free solar means. I think what we can learn from the Americans is the fact that solar as a service was created in order to remove all the hassle, but you can only remove all the hassle in one way, and that's by pushing all the risks onto the supplier. So this is really the core of the business model. It's for you as a client, or for anyone who is a client who's looking to have solar panel on the rooftop, just realize that the way to get rid of the hassle is to trust or make sure that you have the kind of agreement, a PPA agreement, that pushes risk onto the supplier. Because the more risk you push onto the supplier, the less you have to care about it, and the less you have to spend time actually evaluating it. And when you learn from some of the really big US stories, so I like, for example, the case study of Walmart. So Walmart has about 150 megawatts of on-site rooftop in the US through power purchase agreements with a few different top suppliers in the US. And Walmart went as far as, when they did the tendering for these PPAs, they actually went as far as just giving simply the GPS coordinates for the rooftops, nothing else. So just the GPS coordinates. So they would not accept dealing with any hassle themselves, except for finding those GPS coordinates, which hopefully you'll be able to find in your information system. You can find the GPS coordinates for the sites that you use. But aside from that hassle, they did nothing. No evaluations, no particular analysis, nothing. They just provided these GPS coordinates to suppliers and said, look, have a look at these rooftops, use whatever information is out there, and then tell us what price per kilowatt hour you can deliver at. And then came the phase in which Walmart actually did some work. And I think this is the kind of work that anyone who's looking at rooftop solar will have to do by themselves, is to try to assess the saving. When you know the kilowatt hour price of putting solar on your roof, and you have your own current kilowatt hour price from buying power from the grid, you can calculate the saving. And the best way to do that is usually to calculate the total net present value of all the savings across the whole PPA. So you just take all those 15 years or 20 years, whatever it is, and you create a net present value of the whole thing. And you get a simple number. And then Walmart just had that number per site, and they would just pick all the sites that had a net present value over a certain level, and they would go to the supplier and say, look, go ahead, please build us whatever you had planned to build. And this is where you come down to the fourth bullet here, another learning from the US market. Because at this point you might be saying, but look, this sounds a bit crazy. You don't want to hand over responsibilities to someone else to just do whatever they want with your rooftop, and you have done nothing, no analysis whatsoever. That doesn't work, does it? No. So what is usually done in the US market is that you write a PPA, but the PPA has a first 6-month grace period, during which suddenly the supplier has to do the work. They have to present you with exactly how this is going to be done, the analysis, etc. And of course, both you and the supplier have the right to step away from that contract if for some reason it doesn't work. And of course, the PPA should specify, that there should be a clear analysis done of the rooftop, etc. But looking at it from the side of the supplier, this is okay, because this is the suppliers know what they're doing. They are supposed to, now that they know that you've signed the PPA, even though there's a grace period, you have signed it, they are willing to do this work, and they will do the work for you, and you will not have to hire a consultant to do it. You shouldn't basically have to deal with the hassle. So you've come all this way, all the way to the end of, or the start of the project, and you have not dealt with hassle. Now, that is how we can put serious speed into this market. Because at that point, when you realize that, okay, this is how rooftop projects could actually work, then the final insight from the US market is that, look, if this is how it works, then it's actually more efficient to do this for a large number of rooftops, or for perhaps every rooftop that you have, than only for one. Because the more rooftops you do it for, the more significant the amount of economical value will be for the suppliers. So you'll get more attention and more focus from the suppliers, and they'll be willing to take even more risk. From your own organization, because the NPV of your savings is going to be significantly larger. So this suddenly ends up being kind of a hero story on top corporate level, and you get whatever mandate you need to push it through. So that's why you've seen over time in the US market how these enormous tenders have taken place. I mean, Whole Foods have done rooftop PPAs for all of their stores. Walmart, the same thing. Companies like Intel have done coordinated PPA rollouts for every industrial rooftop that they have. Because once you realize that there's a way around the hassle, it actually just makes sense to get it done. And when we're at that point, I think we put some new speed into the market. We've just increased that pace of deployment that is crucial for hitting the targets of this market, for hitting the targets of Agenda 2030. Because SDG 7, which is the SDG that asks for more renewable energy, so SDG 7.2, it's the actual SDG target that tells us to put more renewable energy into the grid. It is behind schedule, not only elsewhere in the world, but in Europe, it's behind schedule. So this is not just about your company, it's not just about our company or the suppliers for that matter, it is about the SDGs and cracking the code to getting acceleration into the rooftop market. Right, that would be enough for me and hopefully some questions. Over to you, Mercy.
Thank you very much, Harald. Also, thank you very much, Yeri and Carol. These were super informative presentations, and how I hope that the audience was listening very cautiously. And now what I would love to do is to start the round of the Q&A. So I would love to read the questions coming from the audience. So please just type, I guess that is at your right, any questions that you may have, and I will pass them on to the speakers. Perfect. So as the questions I start arriving, I actually would love to start with one of the questions that I had in mind when I was listening to the presentation of Yeri from Decathlon. So you mentioned, Yeri, that your model, the model that Decathlon follows, is more focused on PPA models and also on leasings. And for that, you really need to have interaction, to have conversations with the landlords. So we know that there are some technical and regulatory hurdles. There are some barriers on the way, but actually there are some challenges also for the landlords and also for the rental sites. So could you please enlighten us a little bit more on that direction?
Of course, thanks for the question. Yes, for us, it's not only the technical and administrative barriers is for everyone, and everyone is facing that. But for us, the journey starts within the internal conviction and to get real estate at the same line as sustainable development goals. And for us, so we need to convince first our real estate people that are in direct contact with the landlords to get green lease contracts where we can integrate solar panels or the on-site systems to get our renewable energy. And that's something that we see that is not common in a lot of countries. So that's an implementation that we need to have within all landlords, that it's become common that green lease contracts are more common in the US and that on-site, and the potential that is for the moment on-site needs to be covered. So that we can get our target and achieve our target, and also that the landlords see the benefit of it to use their roof that is built for it and cover it by solar installations.
I see, very good, very clear. And picking up how actually we can combine the deployment of solar with the storage, we have one question for Harald. So how do you integrate storage in your solar as a service offer?
Yeah, that's a very good question. It's actually, of course, it's super complex to some extent, because over time, I think storage is going to generate a lot of values for corporate customers, but it's going to be significantly more dynamic values than solar. I mean, solar is very straightforward. You deliver power and you pay for the power. And then, of course, with storage, we can do about 5 or 6 different things. So it then ends up being complex, but complex doesn't mean impossible. So it's already something we're seeing happening in the US. We see just simple corporate contracts for buying the services, the reliability services of storage. And that is going to happen. We're on the level right now where we're trying out models, financial models for that in Europe, and we haven't quite made them work yet. So I mean, in the sense that we haven't taken them to a point where they make money for both us and the client in a reliable way. But it's fairly close, so that's going to happen very soon. The other thing I want to say about that, which I think is an important point, is that typically you don't have to optimize the solar asset for storage. So in almost all cases, you can basically go ahead today, build a solar asset, and then just wait for whatever opportunities to do storage that comes up. There might be a few exceptions to this rule, but as a general point, solar is so standardized and it's just so simple to implement that we would recommend against turning it into one big complex project. And actually, there's a higher likelihood that you're going to be able to deploy quickly if you break it up to several different projects.
Very good, thanks. And also related to this last point on breaking down on small projects, you have pointed to the hero story. So that is for the higher management for the companies. Instead of just focusing, for instance, on one installation, to become more ambitious, to aim for, I don't know, 3, 4, 5 more installations, more warehouses to cover them with solar, for example. And for that, we have on specific questions is whether do you use the same PPA agreement to cover multiple sites? How does it work?
Yeah, so yeah, good. I mean, these are technical questions, but very good ones. The preferred way would be to have one simple PPA template and just switch out the numbers. Now, the only thing that's working against that in Europe would be that different countries will have a bit of, there are some differences in what kind of PPAs you can sign. And actually, in some countries in Europe, you can still not sign rooftop PPAs, and then you can sign a lease instead, which is ultimately ends up working almost exactly the same way, but the contract's going to look a little bit different. So if you do this in a cross-country way in Europe today, then you will end up. But I think you can make that very clear in the RFP, that you can say, like, look, these are the 80% of the contract that's going to look the same across all places. Now, these are the 20% that's going to be a little different in Poland and Germany. So it can still be very standardized. In the US, it has been done with one single contract, and then you just you basically have appendices for the different sites with different kilowatt-hour prices, and that's of course a very, very neat way to do it.
Lovely, thanks, Harald. And we have one question specifically for Carol. And that, I guess, is related to the model that you have showcased for Australia, where also you discuss how you integrate storage into their strategy. And that is, how much do you incorporate the peak shaving and also the load balancing into your energy strategy? So how that relates to the building management system, meaning how do you integrate this storage in your business model, and how that help IKEA, but also the grid?
Yeah, thank you so much. It's a very good question. And I think when we look from the batteries perspective, you need to look into a couple of different revenue streams to optimize it and to have a good business model. And one part is definitely the peak shaving and reducing the capacity that you need from the grid. So this is definitely one of the positions which is going into the business case. The second one is there any local regulation as well, which is enabling you to benefit as well from owning the storage? So if you are providing the flexibility to the grid through your storage, for example, is there local regulations which are increasing your additional revenue streams connected to that one? And I think this is where we see the storage is developing quite well. It's always this combination of these two, Plus, there could be the third level, which is much more connected to resilience of the grid and how stable is the grid. So within some of the markets where there are shortages when it comes to electricity, then the resilience part is coming as a third parameter. In the case of Australia, I think what was really important is as well the collaboration with the grid owner, a local grid owner with whom the project is being developed as well, to provide this flexibility as well to the grid and support the local grid, which is important part of the business case.
Lovely. Thanks. Thanks, Carol. And now I would love to bring up one of the models that actually is rather new and extremely important because it's about bringing the society, the communities into the corporate strategies. And this model has been presented by Yuri, by Decathlon, and is the concept of the energy community. So Yuri, you mentioned that you are receiving like co-investments from the citizens, and this is the model that actually has been welcomed by the European Commission to bring the citizens into the energy transition. Could you please elaborate a little bit further on this specific model?
Yeah, of course. So what we do, like I explained, we always work with a third-party investment. And we asked to them to not invest by banks, but rather go for a co-investment by citizens. And specifically, if there is an option to do it with Decathlon customers. So what we did was send it out to all our customers that are living nearby the potential to invest within solar panels that will come. And we opened up to invest within starting of 500 euros for share until the maximum size of the investment. And we saw within 2 weeks that everything was sold out and the investment was reached. And so that's something that we did now already if I'm not wrong, already 10 sites. And that's something that we are looking forward and using now as a way to invest or solar panels and not by investment by banks.
Lovely, thanks. And we have one question that I guess is for Harald, but anyone feel free to jump in. So actually that is translated to what is the minimum range of the area to have available on-site deals. You have mentioned, Harald, that you already have made some projects of about certain kilowatts, but also I've written down 1 up to 1.5 megawatts, right? So what is like the minimum like area to actually have valuable on-site deals?
Yeah, I mean, I'm gonna tell you, it's very small. It's the smallest project we've ever done was 20 kilowatts. And I don't know if you can do the math here, but I think 20 kilowatts would end up being something like a few hundred square meters. Is that, yeah? I might be wrong here, but I think not even a few hundred square meters, even less than that. Maybe someone is faster than me here in doing the math. It's very small. So that works. I mean, the question is just if you find a supplier who's willing to go through the process of working with you in order to do that. It's arguably easier if you're doing a big rollout and then one of the rooftops is very small. Then I think that's fine. You know, people would want to throw that in, and then for yourself, it might be a question if are you actually going to save money on that one? Maybe not, so that you might have a negative net present value of your savings, but you know, maybe that's okay because you think it's an important symbolic action or something. So I feel a lot of times with clients, we end up having conversations where we look at 2 or 3 really big things and then we talk to them about throwing in something small on the side, and that might be really good because in the end, that's how you build out the maximum capacity. So to summarize, there's no rules here. You know, we can get it all done, but let's spend our time on the big stuff first. Probably best.
I can just add to this one that we see that today majority of the installation in Europe are very much optimized around self-consumption in real time. So you look on your profile on consumption within the building to minimize how much electricity you inject into the grid. And I think that's one of the opportunities that we still have with the space and what we see within among other companies as well, to increase the installations on site if there are the regulations which are enabling for non-utility company to in easy way to sign the contract of selling the electricity to the grid, and or different flexibility mechanisms. And I think that's maybe where we see it's growing and developing is very much connected to this easy access to the grid. If it's restricted, then we see majority of the installations are limited to what you can consume in real time within your building.
Lovely. Thank you, Harold, and also thank you, Carol. And now we have 5 minutes left, and I would love to start closing this webinar. And before doing so, I also would like to remind the audience that the resource and Harold, Yuri, and Carol, they have been working on a resource report on on-site renewable energy generation and storage that you can find in our website, where you will see all these examples and more. And to link up, I would love to say that also in this report, we provide like an overview of what are the best or the fit for the future regulatory environment for these models to thrive. And before closing up, I would love to have like one line from each of the speakers to see. So at the beginning of the presentation, we have seen like a steady growth of on-site installations. But of course, this growth can be steeper. So what do you think, in your opinion, that needs to change in Europe for actually see this market grow like faster?
Yeah, I can start. I think the first part is about unification of permitting procedures. I think the permitting procedures can be so different even between the different regions and within the country, which makes the process very long. And I think especially for the smaller size companies, it is very difficult sometimes to go through the process. The second one is again this part of the instruments which are encouraging the support to the grid. I think this is whenever we will see these instruments more widely adopted, I think we'll see much more projects which are increasing on-site generation as well as battery storage.
Very good.
I can add to that like Harold said before, that we can have in all the European countries already a third-party PPA investment would be great, that we can unify that, and that for us we can multiply what we did in one country to other countries easily, and that we don't need to adapt the PPA model, but we can use it all through Europe. And also secondly, that we can have the auto consumption, that we can cover the consumption that we have, a little bit like Carol explained, 24/7, that we can reach out to that, and that we don't need to be obliged to have injection on certain European countries.
Lovely, thanks.
Yeah, I mean, all very good suggestions. And if I can just take a step further back, I would just say it's so interesting to note that it's all about companies making decisions at this point. I mean, we grew up in Europe with the solar rollout that was much more about governments making decisions about feed-in tariffs, etc. But that time is past, and what's going to drive companies use about 70% of all power in society. So they are the ones, the decisions of companies is what's going to accelerate the market. And so the question is like all kinds of things we can do to help companies make more decisions faster. And I think Carol and Jory mentioned a bunch of really good things. And to add a final thing, we can have more good webinars like this one. We go back to you, Mercy. But it's really, this is a part of it, isn't it? Like just making sure we have this conversation, we help companies make decisions, help companies get rid of the hassle and move forward. That's done.
Fantastic words, Harald. So with those words, I would love to move to the next slide, and we will see how the audience could access our report in our website. And with that being said, I would like to say again, thank you, Harald, Yuri, and Carol, and the audience for being with us. And that's it. So thank you very much again, and I wish you all a lovely evening.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.